Skeleton is good, and I teach this in all my courses, is to think with that end in mind. You're going to have to submit this document and work backwards from that. Don't go through it from start to finish as a writing process. Put the big sections out there. And, obviously going to call these slightly different things, but in your proposal, your what is going to be pretty much your introduction. And then in introduction, you're going to have a problem statement section. You're going to have key concepts as a section. You're going to have your thesis statement as a section. You're also going to have things like a motivation. So let's talk about that very quickly. And this, I think, will answer your question, Sabelo. Some guidelines and direction around, the earlier introductory section of a proposal is going to be to define your contribution. So your contribution could be that you think you're going to find a cure for COVID-19. I don't know, whatever. So that's your contribution. Now, 5 years ago, that the significance of that contribution would not be as great as it is today, right? So there's a contribution in the narrow definition of the sense to the field, but is there significance in that contribution? What is the real world application of it? How are you going to make a contribution to the world? Remember, we spoke about a problem statement. Is your contribution, by going through your research study, going to solve that problem? If that problem is significant, then your research has a high level of significance. So these are all the things that you need to be thinking about in that introductory section up at the front there. Okay, so hopefully that answered a couple of the questions there. Just having a look there. Please, guys, keep the questions coming and we'll deal with them as we go through it. All right, then why? So now that's sort of leading on from what I was talking about. And your motivation, is going to have to be linked to the problem statement that you want to solve. And very often, if you have to get funding for your research, the people that are going to be paying for your research are going to be interested and say, well, why should I, fund this research? What is the contribution that I'm going to get out of it? And if you look at, new drugs that come onto the market, if you look at new products, that get sold, there is an incredible amount of research that very often goes behind these products, and industry and designers and companies will look at research to understand and make decisions, about what products they want to commercialize. And so in whatever field or faculty you are studying, you need to be able to make that link with the world of commerce or business if you have to be getting funding, and it could be in a non-governmental sense, public sector, for example. All of those are going to have a context that they're coming from that says, we need to solve some problems. There's some researchers available that are interested in doing research in this field. Let's make sure that what we're willing to pay for is, going to solve a problem through that researcher's contribution, and that contribution is significant enough for us to fund this research, or just for the institution. If your studies are paid for and you're blessed and you've got funding and support and financially independent to do that, that's fantastic, well done, and great news. But your institution is still going to have to say, yes, we sign off this proposal. We approve you to do the study. We think that there is sufficient, significance, in the study through the contribution you're going to make. And again, your background reading and immersing yourself in the field is going to help, answer that question, because you're going to start understanding, is there gaps? And a lot of good research and other final reports and articles, etc., are always going to have a section at the end that's called future work. And this is a tip that I would really like you to take away, is in your scanning of articles and reading of literature, etc., go through it, but then at the end, look for that section that says future work. And there they will make recommendations. They will say, you can extend this work if you look at this angle, or if you add this aspect or this dimension, etc. And there could be a blueprint for you in terms of defining, the motivation for your study, because other research was done, it hasn't been completed. This researcher recommended we take it in a certain direction. And as I say, you'll pick up those gaps in the literature and will help you define the significance of the study. Palesa just asked for assistance in clarifying the theoretical framework. Very good question. And very often in my one-on-one coaching calls, this is the first question that I ask, because a theoretical framework creates some scaffolding, if you like, for your work. So, scaffolding is not the building. The building is the contribution that you make. It's your results. It's the thing that you create. But you're using the scaffolding to build that building, okay? And, there are so many different ways of approaching and talking about theoretical frameworks, but the simplest way that I've come to think about it over the years is that it's some sort of visualization or metaphor or construct for the concepts in your field. So in my PhD, I use grounded theory, through which, as an inductive method, you can generate theory and you can create a theoretical framework. So what was my theoretical framework that I came up with? It was a simple range, and it was a range of measuring sentiment in agile software development teams. And my theoretical framework was that there were relative degrees of sentiment in teams. There was a positive sentiment on one end of the range and a negative sentiment on the other end of the range. You could have a theoretical framework that describes relationships between key concepts. You could have, a relationship that, or a framework, that has some sort of coding or some sort of theoretical reference numbers allocated to things that occur in your field, or some sort of scale, if you like, that helps you understand the severity or the degree to which something impacts something else. So a theoretical framework is, if you are doing an inductive research method like grounded theory, you've got a relative degree of freedom to actually create a theoretical framework. But if you're doing a deductive method, you're going to be assessing existing theoretical frameworks. So let's say, for example, let me give you a very simple example. A theoretical framework for juvenile remediation in Zimbabwe during the late 90s indicated that there were three main things that counselors needed to focus on, as an example. And the theoretical framework says that through studies and research in that field, within those dimensions, consistently highlighted that those three things were the most important to consider when, remediating or rehabilitating juvenile delinquents, for example. And I know of that as some research that is being done in our community. And as a deductive methodology, whatever it is that you choose, you would be taking that theoretical framework and then potentially testing it. So you would say, okay, well, I've found a fourth one, for example, or I don't believe these are the right three. I think there is only two, for example, or I think there's a lot more that needs to be considered. Or if the field is relatively open and there isn't enough theoretical framework out there at the moment, then, as I say, you might be creating one. So it can often be as simple as that.